talk to you about the temptations. No, not that one. I knew when I put it up here in the plural, you would already be tapping your foot and waiting on the music. It's not coming. The temptations. It's interesting, isn't it? Matthew, the 3rd chapter, verse 16 says, "And Jesus, when he was baptized, went up straightway out of the water, and lo, the heavens were opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and lighting on him. And a voice from heaven saying, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." And then, very next verse, because that's the end of chapter 3, chapter 4, verse 1. Then, somebody say then. Then Jesus was led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted. Back up one screen. Back up. There you go. See that, verse 17? A voice from heaven announced who he was. He had come into his own identity. This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. And then go to the next screen, Clint. And then Jesus was led to be tempted. Then the temptation came. I pause on that only to make this statement. After your recognition comes, there will come temptation. Maybe a better way of saying it is after you declare your faith, get ready for the tempter to come. Anybody who names himself or herself a Christian is going to face temptation. If you want to avoid temptation, well, just go ahead and yield to it and be a heathen. And then you won't have any temptation. But if you are a Christian, if you identify yourself as a follower of Jesus, if you read the Bible and say you practice it and believe it, then temptation is going to come. It's something we don't maybe talk about enough. Maybe it's one reason that we yield to so many temptations because we don't talk about them as temptations. I have watched in my lifetime such a dramatic change in the American moral landscape. The things that you young folks take for granted on television and just your general entertainment and internet would have been considered heinous when I was young. Not because the laws prohibited wickedness from being displayed on TV. But somehow or another, it was like the nation just understood we were a Christian nation. And there was self-regulation. And the industry didn't necessarily wait on the government to say, you cannot. They just kind of did it because they knew it wouldn't be accepted. You could watch old reruns of some of the early television shows and chuckle at maybe how naive they seem. But it wasn't so much naivete as it was just a declaration of morality. Little things, Leave It to Beaver, a very popular half-hour sitcom. You never saw the mom and dad married, kids. You never saw the mom and dad go to bed in their bedroom, simply because there was no need to approach that. And it would have been considered maybe not in class, good class, to simply show sexual hints that were not necessary to the development of a show. Nowadays, they can't put a show on. Doesn't matter if the sexuality is relative to the show or not, it's got to have it in there because their assumption is it won't be popular, it won't be watched. You have probably observed in the last few years, the last 3 or 4 years, that some of your favorite dramas, if they have a successful first year, the second or third year they stay on the air, they introduce homosexuality, a homosexual character. They introduce more intimate relations between the main characters. They develop and grow once you get hooked on it. Now, I say all that because basically those are temptations. And we continue to allow them to dominate our entertainment industry rather than be considered borderline, risque. We weren't naive and ignorant and stupid in young America. We just had boundaries, and there were limits, and we didn't push the limits. There was a lot of self-restraint in the industry, the entertainment industry. That's absolutely absent today. It's just not there. I've forgotten the numbers on some of the statistics, and you've probably read them. I've got them in my files. America is such a producer of pornographic internet material. It is not, I remember years ago, I think we had our first computer in 1985 or 86. It was an Apple Mac Plus, and it was highly expensive. If you remember, the church had a dot matrix printer, an Apple Mac Plus. That little ensemble cost $3,500 in 1986. Lord, you can buy 25 of those things wrapped up in one PC for like $400. But we were state of the art. And then we watched the internet begin to develop. And then we saw the potential for the internet to be unbelievably powerful in spreading education and good things and religion. We might have been naive about that because it rapidly became more about spreading hatred, pornographic material, bigotry than it ever spread anything else. You got to wonder, where does all that come from? Why do so many hateful people post so many hateful things? Why do so many lewd and nasty people post so many why is America leading the world in the production of pornography? Are we in a catch-22 where we kind of don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg? Is the proliferation of more and more filth creating more and more filth, or is the fact that we put it on there because we've already been tainted and tempted? Yeah, it's like somewhere somebody has to say enough. Only who's going to do that? Who's going to stop it? On a global scale, nobody's going to stop the internet. I remember preaching some messages back in the early 90s when we saw how prevalent the smut industry was going to be on the internet. And I remember saying, please get passwords. Please remember to protect your computer info by password. Remember, you don't let your kids know your passwords. They'll get on. And you hadn't heard me preach that in a long time because you don't need a password anymore. You don't need anything. You don't have to have it. Just get on the internet, and anything and everything is there. You don't have to have a password. They used to say, "Are you 18 or older?" Yeah, right. Every 12-year-old said, "Yep, yes," and that was the clue. The shame of it all is we have simply opened the door to the tempter rather than resist the tempter. And that's what the simple story is about right here. After the voice from heaven said, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased," then Jesus was led into the wilderness to be tempted. We've read these verses before. Let me reread the temptations starting in Matthew, the 4th chapter. The tempter came and said to him, "If you're the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread. The second temptation was the devil took him to the holy city, set him on the pinnacle of the temple, and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it's written, He will command His angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone." And the third temptation, verse 8, again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory, and he said to him, "All these things I will give you if you will fall down and worship me." Now, the reason I want to pause on this day is very simple. Think about this. Think about it from this point of view. The Bible was inspired by God, written by men who didn't know they were writing the Bible, just recording as they felt inspired by God. And they recorded for us the great temptation. Now think about this. The story's in there for a reason. Inspiration of God. If you're the devil, I know some of you feel like that's him sitting by you. Notice how I changed the pronoun for once. If you're the devil and you're going to come to tempt the King of Kings, the number one, the name above all names, God in the flesh, aren't you going to bring your best stuff? Aren't you going to come loaded for war with your best temptations if you're going to come try to tempt the King of Kings, the Lord, the Messiah? You're going to bring your best shot, right? Does any of this sound like your best shot? So you understand, there's a reason for this. This is the best the devil can offer the Lord Jesus Christ. If you are who you say you are, tell these stones to become bread. You shouldn't have to be hungry just because you've been fasting. If you are who you say you are, throw yourself down. No harm can come to you. If you'll worship me, I'll give you, and that's the best you got. But it is. Because if this is what he tempted Christ with, and you think you're tempted with something worse, well, then we're naive. So there has to be a hint, a message in here. Let me show you how Christ responded to him quickly. First of all, every time in these three temptations, he said, "It's written." It is written. And then he said, "Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." It is written, "Thou shalt not test the Lord, tempt the Lord." It is written, "You shall worship the Lord God, and him only shall you serve." So let me just summarize four things and tell you what I think these temptations are trying to reveal to us and make us understand. If this is the model of temptation, because this is the baggage that he brought against the Messiah, the Son of God, God in the flesh. And I sit around thinking, oh, you just don't know how bad I'm tempted. Jesus was never tempted like me. You're just missing the point. Let's talk about it for a minute. First of all, he came to him essentially in all three cases and said, "Prove something to me." I'm going to summarize 4 points from these. Prove. Prove yourself. Prove who you are. If you are who you think you are, prove it to me. I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill and belabor the point, but let me just tell you that I think this is a temptation most of us face and don't think of it as a temptation. It's interesting to be old, because I can tell you that being old, you look back on all your stages of development and growth, and you're kind of embarrassed at a few of them, and you're kind of mad at yourself for a few things you did when you were young. But you realize there's no point in bringing that up, because younger people coming up are going to go through the same things, and it would almost sound silly for me to say, hey, this is what I said and this is what I did, and it was stupid, because that's what some of you are saying and doing. But it's a natural process of growth and maturity and understanding and recognition. But let me just tell you in a nutshell, I have been through my search for significance, and I think everybody has to go through that to some extent. Let me also tell you that I wasted a lot of time on it because I have no significance. Trying to find my significance was simply vanity in operation. I am somebody. I am cool. I am smart. I am intelligent. I can accomplish. I can do this. I can do that. I can, and I will, and I did a number of things. And if I look backwards and criticize them, it seems inappropriate because they were good, they were beneficial. It's just that so often the motive behind it was more about proving that I could than doing anything good for anybody else. It had a lot to do with me. Just hang with me for a minute. I don't want this to sound like a put down or an insult, but and I sure don't want to lump it into age, because old people can be just as vain and ignorant as young people can be. But some of you old folks, I know that limited the number of hands already, because you will not admit you're old. But with some of you old folks who can relate to what I'm saying, if I say we spend the early part of our career trying to prove we're something and somebody before we ever get to a place where it doesn't matter, we don't care what anybody. If you can relate to that because you did that when you were young, and you young people just sit and watch. I just want old people to say, I did that. I tried to prove myself to everybody. See the hands around? This is a common thing. We're searching for our significance. We're somebody. I can do anything. I'll prove it to you. Nothing wrong with that, I suppose. Except that it's interesting, isn't it, that was one of the temptations that was brought against Christ. Prove yourself. To whom? Well, look who's doing the tempting. I've done a lot of things in my life, in my youth. I've done a lot of things. I decided to take some airplane lessons just to see if I could, because I wanted to be able to say I can fly a plane, and I did. Not like Rick, but I flew. Took both my girls for Discovery flights on their 16th birthday. Made them fly a little Cessna 172 out of the hook. That was pretty cool. Just so. One day we were sitting around the house when the kids were little, and we were watching something on TV, and it turned into trash and right before our eyes. And I said, man, I wish somebody would just put a decent TV show on and just portray a few Christians. And the little girls said, yeah, that'd be nice. And I said, why don't we just do that ourselves? And they're like, yeah, right. That's all it took for me. You're going to say, yeah, right, like Daddy's too stupid to have his own TV show? Well, I'll just create one. So I did. Went down to Channel 22, created a little half-hour Christian variety show called Foundations for Life. Went on there, went down there and taped our shows. Got my daughters. By that time, they were older, high school. I think Allison might have been in college at that time, because I had her host on there a time or two, co-host on there. And it's good, nothing wrong with it. But to be honest with you, it was just something I kind of did on a dare. You think I can't do that? Of course I can. Had Gary Mouton down playing his guitar. Had Julie Hall on one time as a guest. And the television studio called me and said, we have received more phone calls and input from that show you put on with her than any show we've put on in the last month. That one show got more response than anything else that any other show has done. Stay with that theme. I wasn't going to stay with that theme. I was just proving points along the way. Had something to prove. I can too. I can do anything. That's why when my contract ran up, I quit. I wasn't in it for the right reasons and the motivation to do something great for Christ and continue to produce, and I just to prove to my chuckling daughters that I could. Be significant. Be somebody. Daddy thinks he's smart. Hey, Daddy knows he's smart. Let me prove it to you. And the egotism and the arrogance that comes into the pursuit of significance. I remember the book called In Search of Significance. I went through it. I read it. I was trying to find my own significance. Listen, and some of you who are getting started in careers and you're trying to make a name for yourself, I get it. And this is not meant to be a criticism in that direction. Just make sure you're doing it because it is your passion to do that, not because it's your ego that needs to be proving something to anybody. Because anytime I start having to prove to you who I am and that I'm in charge and I'm the big dude and I know more than you know, I've already stepped across so many scriptural violations, it's not even funny. The New Testament clearly warns me not to even get into heated arguments over doubtful disputations. Just leave it. Let the theologian prove himself. I don't have anything to prove to him. I get chastised fairly often. We live stream our services. I think Danielle put some, you still able to put them on? I hadn't paid attention in a while. Puts them on YouTube. I email the notes, the abbreviated, just an abbreviation, I email them out. And the emails go out to quite a few. Not many people flip on the videos and watch them, but the emails go out and then they get forwarded. And sometimes when I get a link back through our subscriber, the company we use, I see a link that was forwarded and I realize, oh, they did not forward that because they liked what I said. They forwarded that to their buddy so that they can talk about it. One of them will surely email me that I'm going to hell sometime this week. And occasionally I do get those. I get the dress downs. Carpenter, how far you have fallen from the wagon. And I'm telling you, years ago when I first left denomination, I felt like I needed to continue to argue and prove myself and prove, look, I appreciate your theology. I appreciate what you're doing. But at some point, you have to understand there's a reason that this is one of the temptations that the devil brought against Christ. If you're who you say you are, if you're who that voice, if you are, if you can, if you think you, then prove it. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to prove anything to anybody except God. You're not bettered and you're not worsened because you did or did not try to prove yourself to anybody. Live by the Scripture so that everything you do, you can precede it by saying, it is written. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing today. It is written. I live the way I live because it is written. It took me a long time to simply try to live according to the way it is written. I read books. I went to conferences. I studied success. I tried to be the model of everything that the right people said. Years ago when we reorganized, 15, 16 years ago, we moved into a little storefront down the street, put out about 50 chairs, and started all over completely. Came up here and started building. Took us 12 months to get in this building, just a shell of the building it ourselves. Took us 12 months. If you remember, some of you, we just had a long string of big light bulbs hanging across there when we came up after 12 months in the storefront right down the street, down here where Fashion Forest is. And clearly, the church needed every penny that it had, and so I had to find a way to make income myself just to stay alive. And so we had another minister in church who would preach on Sunday nights so that I could go catch a plane and leave. And I would leave almost every Sunday afternoon. I'd catch a plane and I'd fly somewhere in the United States to start doing seminars, and I would do usually 5 seminars in 5 different cities. Seminar Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, a seminar Friday. All day Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then my seminars were from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock, and then on Friday when I finished the last seminar, I'd go straight to the airport, catch a plane, fly back. And so I was just here doing the weekend work and making a living, trying to keep the church going, trying to keep moving here. And the seminars I was doing were business related, finance and accounting for small businesses, non-accountants, how to supervise and mentor employees and train staff and develop your staff. And had great clients. Coca-Cola in Atlanta, Georgia, flew me there 3 times to train all of the supervisors. I had 230, 250 supervisors and foremen in 3 different sessions. So what is that? 800 managers and supervisors in Atlanta that I talked to about how to train and mentor their employees. And did it in 22 states, I don't know, 70,000 air miles in 10, 11 months or so. And it was a way to make a living, and it was invigorating, and it was challenging, and I got to be the expert from out of town all over the country. So I felt so cool and so significant and so important. And in 1 month, I had a really stellar month. They would pay money for just showing up and doing your seminar, $700 or so a day, and then everything that was bought at the back, you could pick up commissions and more off of that. So you could really load it up. And so 1 month I just had a tremendously successful run. And because of that, the next time they flew me to their headquarters up in Kansas, you had to go up there periodically because I know you won't believe this, but they actually taught us how to dress, what kind of suits to wear, what colors to wear. They actually made us look right. Had personal training for which I've all forgotten completely, dramatically. Got some food down here on my pants even as I'm checking myself out now. And they made you learn to speak in front of people. You had to get this far from somebody's face and speak loudly without them being able to smell your breath, just to teach you how to control your breathing in and breathing out. It's pretty cool. Try it sometime today. You'll discover you can't do it. They will pass out. I put a few on the floor. And so the next time they flew me up, well, surprise, surprise, because I had a stellar month. The Big Cheese, the owner himself, was there, come to meet me. That was pretty cool. I felt so important. I actually stuck my chest out a little more than usual, tried to hold my gut in, walk around with a little confidence, because they told me up front, the big dog has come to meet you. That's cool. It's really cool. And sure enough, when we had a lunch session, he came in looking for the guy, and he saw me. They pointed him out, brought him over. He sat down, just he and I are going to have a powwow. And he says, he bragged and he said the right things. And then, of course, he hinted that I was going to move up with the company. And when he did, I thought, I got to be honest with this man. I admire him. He's a tremendous, successful businessman. His company had 325 seminars going on every day somewhere around the world. That's success. Largest seminar trainers in the world. And he starts talking about advancing, and I said, I probably should tell you and be honest with you right up front. I'm a pastor of a church, and I'm only doing this work to make a living. Our church is reorganizing. As soon as the church is sufficiently set and we pay property off, I'm quitting this and going back to pastoring. That's my calling. That's my job. This is to make money. And he said, he kind of laughed. He said, so you're going to use all our training and then just throw it away? And I said, pretty much. Except I may take some of it back to church with me and use some of it there. And this man, this principled man, waved his finger and said, oh, no, 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 no. Don't do that. And I thought he was going to lecture me about copyrighted material, and I don't use their. He said, no, no, no. He said, what we do here, this is all about making money. What you do in that church has nothing to do with money. It's about faith, fellowship, and love. You can't carry what we do here back into your church. And I'm like, what? What? I wanted to go back to my church and be a star and wear a good suit, the right kind, and blend the right colors and stand up with the right posture and the right tone of voice and make a lot of money off of you. Oh, yeah, there was that part. He said, no, 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 no. Church is about faith, fellowship, and love. Nothing we do has anything to do with that. Principled man. He could have flattered himself. He could have told me how cool he was. He could have told me how his company had done so much for so many people, including me. And he could have told me how a lot of things other than, throw this away. You don't use this, what we do. You know what that tells me about him? He had long since passed the point where he thought he was so significant to the world and so important to everything that you needed everything he could put out. Listen, you are in a search for significance simply because it's the human nature to be in a search to be significant. I want to be a good wife or a good husband. I want to be the right person, the best parent. I want to be a good boss. I want to be a good dad. I want to be recognized for. I want my kids to praise me. I want somebody to notice what I am. And that is a source of temptation. See, I know. Oh, I know. You've been trained. You've been taught psychologically. You have been groomed, and you've been taught you're so important to the world that if you don't get an election to go the way you want, you ought to just sit down in the middle of a highway, suck a pacifier for a while, and make cars go around you because you are that important to the world. But I'll tell you what's written. What's written says, don't let a man think more highly of himself than he ought. That's what's written. So you can't strut your ego and call yourself a dynamic Christian, and I can't help it if the worms get in my way. You hear them on TV. I know they're funny. I know it's funny. You can't soar with eagles if you're down there clucking around with turkeys. You know they're talking about you. You do know when you hear that, you're the turkey. And they're the eagle soaring up there in God's dynamic wisdom. And God, and they can just say, God, take this rain and stop it. And God stops it. And I said to the hurricane coming into Louisiana, stop right there. And God turned that hurricane and it did not hit our church. Yeah, right. Because you're that significant. But I'll tell you what's written. Don't let a man think more highly of himself than he should. That's what's written. Here's what's written. In honor, let everyone prefer his brother over himself. That's what's written. You understand? This may look insignificant, like, oh my gosh, these three temptations, the best he's got. Oh, but they're hitting us right where we live. The need to be known, to be important, to be recognized. I wish they'd just recognize who I am, what I can do. Yeah, who cares? Be the best you can be. Told a young wife one time who was going through some real trouble with her husband, and she's afraid that he was thinking of leaving her, and I said, she was asking me for advice, and what can I do? And I said, what have you done? And she started telling me what she'd done. She'd called a lawyer, she'd done this, she'd done that, and I can't give you all 4 or 5 things. And she was covering, and I said, have you thought about just becoming the best wife you can be? What? It's pretty hard for anyone to hate another person if they're genuinely loving and kind and attentive. It's pretty hard. I can hate anybody if you're a dog. Talk to me rudely. I can walk off and leave you standing on the curb in the rain. It's been a long time since I've been disrespected badly, but I don't mind telling you, the last time I got disrespected, my behavior wasn't real good. I don't handle disrespect very well. I wonder why it is in our marriages we think, hey, if you start threatening me, you going to leave? I'll tell you what you won't take with you. Oh, what? Well, then they're going to start getting a better lawyer than you and start dividing right now. But man, if you really want it to work, I got a suggestion. Do what's written. I don't have time for that lesson. But man, there's a lot written in the New Testament about husbands and wives. And very few of us live up to it. Don't defraud each other. Don't cheat each other out of what you had a right to expect. Each one of us has a right to expect something in marriage. That's in 1 Corinthians 7th chapter, clearly laid out. Do not defraud. Do not cheat each other out of what he or she had a right to expect when they said, I do. That's in the Scripture. And we cheat each other all the time and then wonder why it's not working well, because we're not following what's written. We're trying to prove our own significance. Well, he just doesn't recognize me for what I am. Well, she doesn't pay. Thinking too highly of ourselves. Number two, why would God want you to hunger or suffer? That's one of the temptations. Turn the bread, just on into bread. You're hungry. Why would God allow people? I just can't believe that God would let people suffer and go hungry. You heard that before? I hear it 5 or 6 times a year at least. You know, I wish I could believe in Jesus like you do, preacher. I wish I could go to church, but I just don't see. If there's a God, he's sure doing a pitiful job of taking care of people, isn't he? I don't even know how to answer that. I mean, I will literally hear that 3 or 4 times a year. I don't know how to relate to people who are proud agnostics. Well, I wouldn't say I'm an atheist, but I'm going to tell you one thing. I have a hard time believing. Because God doesn't take care of everybody and feed them? What a temptation Satan threw. Hey, you hungry? A God, the Son of God, shouldn't have to be hungry. Turn the stone into... The minute you start trying to prove anything about God, you make a mistake. You know, I spent the first years of my pastoring trying to prove to people God was a nice God. Someone died, and we call it a premature death. They died too early. I felt like I needed to apologize for God. Well, let me explain to you something here. You see, God loves, and well, God, and I don't know how many times I tried to become God's apologist and explain why this person would have had a car wreck, and why that person was paralyzed, and why that person was just in poverty, and why that one died early, and my goodness, I don't know what point. I'd probably been pastoring, associate pastor at least, probably for 5, 6 years before one day the light just turned on, and I thought, I don't owe anybody an apology for God. I have faith in God, and my faith in God isn't depending on, I will only believe in you if you give me bread to eat today. So what's wrong with their faith? If my faith sustains me when I don't have bread, if my faith sustained me when my electricity was turned off a few times because I just didn't have money to pay my cotton picking bills, and I didn't whine and cry about God, why did you do that? I knew why he did it. Too much credit I overloaded myself with. Wasn't God's fault I couldn't pay my electricity bill a few times. It was me. Too many credit cards. Owed too much money to too many people. Pinching pennies. God, if you're really, you would just bring bread to my front door. You know, I wish I could walk through these temptations of Christ and point out naked pictures, lust of the flesh. It'd be so much cooler if he had just tempted him with porn and adultery. And we could preach about that. But I'm telling you today, there's more to this than meets the eye. The greatest example of temptation must be in this chapter, Matthew 4, because it was the devil's shot at the King of Kings. So he would have brought his best stuff, and this is what we get. And that's why we just skim over it and say, oh, well, you know, I'll never be tempted to turn stones into bread. No, but you are tempted to wonder why God doesn't turn them into that for you, because you're struggling. As if a good God wouldn't make anybody struggle. Which leads us to the third thing. If you hurt yourself, you fell down, if you threw yourself down, wouldn't God raise you up? So why? Years ago, and I tell the story carefully. I can't remember who's kin to who. But years ago, a youth went through the windshield of a car in a car wreck, and it was bad. And for a while, it looked touch and go. And I went to Bentab, where they had taken the child by ambulance, and the mom and dad were just absolutely pacing the floor and having a terrible time. And they were arguing arguing at each other because one of them had not wanted the child to go out with friends that night, and the other one said it was okay. And it was like 2 o'clock in the morning when all this happened. And so, the godly parent was making sure the ungodly parent knew that this would never have happened if they'd had, curfew and hadn't allowed those friends. And I walked into the middle of that, and I remember trying to referee a little bit and saying, look, nothing is accomplished by this throwing stones and accusing each other. You got a kid in there that's hurting, and when you walk in that room, all that kid needs from you is love and support and encouragement. You're going to pull through this, and let's just stop the arguing. And so the way they stopped the arguing was to split up. One went off to find a bathroom and left me with the other one. And the one that I was left with said, first words almost out of, said, I just don't know how God could let this happen. That's a temptation. If you are God, or you're God's son, and you're thrown down from the top of this pinnacle, you should die. But if you're God's son, no harm can come to you. You should be able to say, look, that was the temptation. So if you're a true Christian, shouldn't God protect you and protect your children? And why else are we serving God if we don't have a guarantee that He's going to take care of our kids when they're out on a highway at 2 o'clock at night? Maybe we shouldn't serve God. Give up on Him. Because I can tell you, at 67 years old, and I buried a lot of kids whose mom and daddy loved God, and they were in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people. And I quit apologizing for God for it. It's just life. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. One day, Ecclesiastes said, one day it's your turn to drink from the bitter. One day you get to drink from the sweet. Man, if you're drinking from the sweet today, thank God for it. Chug-a-lug. Oh, I'm making money. People like me. I'm good looking. My wife talking to me again. My kids think I'm awesome. My boss, yay me, yay me. Because one day, through no fault of your own, nobody to blame, phone's going to ring to every one of you in here. And it's going to be your turn, whenever that phone rings, to drink from the bitter cup. And it may be bitter. Oh, it may be bitter. It may really be bitter. What are you going to do, tempter? What you going to do when that happens? Quit God? Because He let you suffer when you fell from the pinnacle? I've stood in hospital rooms and watched husbands and wives hold hands while one of them drew their last breath. But thankfully, most of the time, neither of them had any blame for God. I have watched parents bury young children. One Saturday in particular, right out here at Klein's, we buried a 2-week-old infant in the morning and then drove across town in the afternoon on that same Saturday and buried my mother-in-law in a funeral service over there. 2 weeks old and 70-something years old. Blame God? Oh, absolutely not. A stone that fell should have been raised back up to life? No. Number 4, his final temptation was, if you just quit worshiping, and I'm paraphrasing, you get it. I hope you get these points. He said, I'll give you anything if you fall down and worship me. Let me paraphrase it. If it wasn't for Christ, you'd be a lot more successful, wouldn't you? Yeah, if it wasn't for having to live up to your Christian character, wouldn't you be a lot more successful? You understand that? You understand that's what the 4th temptation is? Quit worshiping Him. Worship me. I'll give you all the kingdoms you see. I had a pastor's wife tell me one time, I was preaching for him, and the pastor's wife told me how successful she had been. And then she made a mistake of meeting a Christian preacher in college. And if it hadn't been for marrying him, she would have been famous and rich by that time. What were you doing? Well, I'll let your imagination carry you there. It clearly wasn't something that was condoned in what is written. But she'd have been rich and famous. Been all these years living with a Christian pastor and whining to herself because she lost her fame and fortune because of Christianity. What a pastor's wife. What a person. What a temptation to think that Christianity holds you back. Y'all see the thing about Kim Burrell? You know who Kim Burrell is? The black gospel singer who's also a pastor of a church here in Houston. And somebody in her congregation held a phone up and filmed her talking against homosexuality a few weeks ago. And they just took that piece where she talked about homosexuality as a perverse spirit. And they put that out on Facebook and YouTube. And Pharrell Williams was supposed to appear with her on the Ellen DeGeneres show the next day or so. But Pharrell quickly backtracked himself from her. He have nothing to do with her. Ellen DeGeneres show dropped her because they're tolerant if you're lesbian, but they're not tolerant if you're Christian. They have much more tolerance than Christians ever thought of having. Because if you're a Christian, you idiot, you think you're going to go very far. You're a nut. She's been banned. She won't be on popular shows. And a whole bunch of other. Yolanda Adams. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I know you love her, but she's not going to ride that train with Kim Burrell into the grave. I watched the clips. I tried to call Kim Burrell. They've made her phone number unreachable. I don't blame them. I just wanted to call her and say, hey, more power to you. God bless you. Want to come talk in my church one Sunday? Come on, girl. Because I know what's written. And I know that what's written ain't always going to make you popular and successful. And you're not going to win the kingdoms of the world if you stay. You understand these temptations are the best the devil could bring? And we just, never mind. It's written, that's enough. Do you know what's written? Do you know? Do you know what you're supposed to do? Do you know how you're supposed to live? Do you know how you're supposed to treat your husband, your wife? Do you know how you're supposed to treat temptation? Do you know how you're supposed to treat your neighbor? Do you know how you're supposed to handle money? Do you know how you're supposed to, do you know what's written about you and how you're supposed to conduct yourself? If you don't know what's written, then no wonder. It'll be hard to stand up for what you don't know. You got to know. Wouldn't this be a great year to just put your nose back in the Bible? The cool thing is you don't even have to have a Bible anymore. You don't have, just get your iPad. You got it. It's free. You don't know where. Ask me. BlueLetterBible.org. You can read all kinds of them on there. Free. Wouldn't it be a great year to just stick your nose back in the book, just so you know how to overcome every temptation that will ever come against you, because all you got to know is what's written. And if you just know what is written for you to do, stand, please. Somebody say, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. Give the Lord a hand of praise. Father, thank you today. Thank you for your promise. Thank you for your word. Thank you for giving us written instructions, how to live, how to behave, how to overcome. Just help us to know them, and then help us to use them and apply them and live by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Not by bread alone, but by your word, in Jesus' name. And everybody say amen. God bless you. Shake hands. Hug somebody. Love on somebody today. We'll see you next Sunday morning, 10:30.